as JK Rowling is under attack once again. Now, for folks who somehow don't know, JK Rowling is the author of the Harry Potter series and frankly, one of the most successful and impressive women alive. She's also a liberal feminist and for years was a hero of the left. But she has been slightly, moderately critical of some elements of transgender activism in a pretty nuanced way. And that is simply unacceptable to extreme LGBT activists in 2023. So now, the folks who run the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle are literally erasing her from the exhibits, downplaying any mention of her and removing her name. In a bizarre blog post announcing this shift, a transgender employee writes that there is a certain cold, heartless, joy-sucking entity in the world of Harry Potter, and this time, it's not actually a Dementor, comparing Rowling to the famous soul-sucking monsters from the Harry Potter books. The blog post goes on to refer to Rowling as she who must not be named and avoids using her name in a comparison to Voldemort, the Harry Potter series' main villain. Now, they go on to accuse Rowling not just of being super hateful and transphobic, but also levying a long list of baseless accusations, such as her supposed support of anti-Semitic creators, the racial stereotypes she used while creating characters, the incredibly white wizarding world, the fat shaming, the lack of LGBTQIA+ representation, the super chill outlook on the bigotry, and the othering of those that don't fit into the standard wizarding world, and so much more. Ah, yes, it is just unacceptable and astounding that a book written in the 90s didn't include transgender or intersex characters. Almost like any other book from the 90s. And it's hilarious that they're mad that the characters in Harry Potter are mostly white when it's set in Britain, which is literally mostly white. I think a lot of these charges, aside from the whole trans issue, are just thrown in as woke buzzwords that they know will hurt someone's reputation at this point, because most of them are based on absolutely nothing of substance. If we're being real, the main reason they're removing her from the exhibit of the cinematic universe and best-selling book series that she created, that literally would not exist without her, is because of her views on trans issues, and they're very open about that. But I want to dive into those views because when you look at them, they're actually pretty nuanced and in line with mainstream thinking of fair-minded people. I realized that JK Rowling's positions weren't actually extreme or hateful when I listened to an in-depth interview series she did with an outlet called The Free Press. They published this amazing podcast, many parts, interviewing Rowling at length and reviewing the controversy, talking to some of her critics, and the portrait that emerged was not some far-right anti-trans extremist, but a moderate liberal who supports trans individuals' right to live their lives as they want and has empathy for trans people, but as a feminist, as a survivor of domestic violence, has concerns about preserving same-sex spaces and fairness and speaks out against women being canceled or targeted or bullied or assaulted because they criticize transgender activism. What a horrifying radical take, right? I mean, let's look at the transphobic tweets that activists use to portray Rowling as a monster. This is probably one of the most infamous threads where she wrote, "If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth." She goes on, "The idea that women like me, who've been empathetic to trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences, is nonsense. I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it is hateful to say so." Yes, guys, I'm not kidding. That is one of the Twitter threads that they use to say she's some extremist bigot. But it sounds to me like a very empathetic and nuanced stance. Similarly, she tweeted, "Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who will have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real? Hashtag I stand with Maya, hashtag this is not a drill." This is referencing a controversy where a woman, a Maya Forstater, was fired from her job over controversial remarks she made that were, in some people's view, transphobic. So I'm sorry, but there's nothing in any of her tweets that's expressed that I've seen or in any of the long, hours-long interviews I've listened to that JK Rowling has done that suggests she's hateful or bigoted in any way. In fact, the sentiments she expressed are pretty commonly held. They'd certainly be mainstream in the American public, and even a lot of people within the LGBT community, like myself, would agree with many of her positions on these issues. So the entire campaign against her, which has been extremely vicious this is just the tip of the iceberg, this one museum canceling her name from the exhibit. This whole campaign is based on a lie. None of these people are actually seeking to distance themselves from a genuine bigot. They're seeking to crush dissent from a moderate with some slightly nuanced opinions on an issue where you're not allowed to think critically or independently anymore and be in the good graces of woke progressive activists. Yet I almost feel like this all misses the point, because even if Rowling did have genuinely offensive or extreme views, that still wouldn't justify erasing her from history or from museums, focusing on exhibits of her art, of her masterpiece that changed the world. It's not feminist or progressive to literally erase a woman who has remarkable accomplishments to her name just because she has the wrong opinion on a particularly hot-button issue. And this is an insane approach that would ruin our ability to appreciate art. Think about it. Is there really very many or any musicians or artists or authors from 25 years ago, let alone 50 or 75 years ago, who didn't have some opinion that would now be considered problematic by the type of people who try to cancel JK Rowling? No, there isn't. But appreciating someone's art should not and does not require agreeing with or endorsing their entire worldview. If anything, it's the opposite, because art is supposed to bring us together and connect us over our shared experiences, even when we come from many different walks of life and perspectives. So the illiberal and intolerant ideology on display at the Seattle Museum and in the broader backlash to JK Rowling is not just going to ruin one exhibit. If society doesn't stamp out this toxic mindset, it'll tear our culture into two irreparably.